All right, I'm really happy to be joined today by happens to be my first cousin, but a real kick-ass, tough, and kind matrimonial attorney, Valerie Tocci. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting.
It's really exciting to talk. I know that there's lots of issues in holy matrimony, either people getting divorced right now, custody issues, and there's a lot to unpackage. So I appreciate you taking the time to share this with everyone and to get everyone under the hood. But I want to start with, I always start with, where in the world are you?
I'm not in the city. I'm outside of the city. We left Manhattan a couple of weeks ago, more than a couple of weeks ago. We've lost all track of time. So we're in Connecticut, and we're going to be here until the city reopens.
Absolutely, that makes sense. That's what we've done also. We're with my in-laws in upstate New York, not New Orleans, and we'll be here until my daughter's school opens or something else happens. But why don't you take us, let's rewind and take us to the early days of your career. Why law, and then more specifically, why matrimonial law?
Well, this answer actually has quite a lot to do with you and your family. So I chose law because our grandfather, our shared grandfather, my maternal, your paternal grandfather, was an attorney and a judge in New York State. And your father, Stephen D. Cohn, is also a very prominent attorney in Brooklyn and around the state of New York. And he is also known for his matrimonial practice, in addition to other practices that he runs. So as a teenager, I had lots of influence from my Uncle Stevie, and got to work in his office sometimes. And so I learned what matrimonial practice was through the experience I had in his office. And always encouraged by him to go to law school. So I did go to law school, to Cardozo Law School, which I really enjoyed. And when I left Cardozo, I had the experience of working for a judge in the Kings County Family Court as a court attorney for a little while, and was exposed to a lot of domestic violence issues and cases like that. And then I went to work for that same judge in the Integrated Domestic Violence Court in Queens County. And from there, I became a prosecutor in the Queens County District Attorney's Office. Then I spent a couple of years as a Special Assistant United States Attorney in the federal system in Brooklyn as a prosecutor, prosecuting gun crimes, prosecuting other kinds of violent crimes, also domestic violence kind of overshadowing the things that I was doing. And from there, when I made the decision to kind of go private, I thought, what better practice has the opportunities to really advocate for people, to be in front of the court all the time, to litigate, but also to come to solutions and help people bridge gaps. And so I was inspired to go into matrimonial law, and I've been doing matrimonial law for the last, I think this is my 11th year, all in New York City. I practice in Manhattan, but also in Brooklyn and Queens, Nassau and Suffolk counties, in Westchester, sometimes a little further upstate. But that's my path to my practice area.
That's awesome. And now you're a partner at Stutman Stutman Lichtenstein.
Yes, Lichtenstein. Lichtenstein. We've been there. It was a firm that was created. Now, our 4th year anniversary will be this June. And prior to that, I was a partner at a firm called Mishcon de Rea, which is a British firm with a New York office that we did quite a lot of cross-border work. It was really an exciting experience for me. And before that, I was associated with a couple of different matrimonial boutique firms in Manhattan.
So since you mentioned your Uncle Stevie, or AKA my dad, he also asked me to go to law school, and I totally took the LSAT. I got into law school, went for 10 days, and I hit the hills. So I
remember that.
Pretty
thank
proud
goodness you did, because now you're right.
Proud of you for what you're doing and following in those footsteps. Since you worked in his office, and I grew up, hanging out at my dad's office, being a little pain in the ass kid. It seems like matrimonial law is very much law and social work combined, and a lot of you're dealing with emotions and sometimes irrational people, probably most of the time irrational people. You know, how do you navigate that, and how do you approach that type of law, since you have such you know, wide experience in other sectors as far as prosecuting and litigation? You know, how do you, you know, bring that social work aspect into it and approach it every day?
I often say when I'm talking to clients, you know, I'm giving you advice that I'm not qualified to give to you. I'm not a therapist. I don't have a PsyD. Very fortuitously, I have made lots and lots of friends who are therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists. And I have a wide network of people that I often refer suffering clients to speak to real professionals about the stressors and the mental health issues and all of those other things that go hand in hand with being in the divorce process, which is extremely stressful. I think I'm sure I've read places that being in the divorce process, no matter what stage, is tantamount to being in a wartime situation or global pandemic situation, we'll say now. It is a very, very, very high stress situation, one that people are not prepared for. And I think people do, you know, suffer PTSD when they recover from it. Even people who have more simple sort of matters, the emotional stakes are extremely, extremely high. And it's really, really difficult to navigate them. And I do encourage everybody who's going through this kind of thing, through a divorce or separation, needs to find individual mental health counseling and support. Really, really important.
Some more than others, right?
Some more than others, yeah. You know, some people have a specific kind of personality that leads them to kind of taking choices in litigation that another person might not take, and that heightens the stakes and makes it more stressful.
And I've seen, you know, in being in business for 8 years and having, you know, various clients in different industries, I've definitely seen some fought out, you know, litigation and battles and, you know, threats of lawsuits amongst, you know, business partnerships. So you add the familial aspect, children to that mix. I can't imagine the you know, the tinderbox that creates.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's been, you know, as a matrimonial attorney, like what's been one of, like, what's your biggest challenge? You know, is it a tough client? Is it a tough situation? You know, what has been your most challenging you know, time being a matrimonial attorney?
I think each case is unique and each challenge is unique. Certainly, there are times I think where you have opportunities to settle something, opportunities to move something forward. And, you know, the challenge is that it is a high stakes situation. And there are people with quite large personalities, whether those are clients or people on the other, the spouse on the other side, or other attorneys. You know, that's the challenge, to overcome the emotional leverage that people hold over each other to try to move it forward. Because really the most important thing to do is not to stay locked in your positions, not to have you know, locked swords, but to try to resolve these issues so that the people can go on with their lives. The thing that I say, I think is a really reliable cliche, is that, you know, nobody regrets getting divorced. You know, if you come to the point of getting divorced, you're not going to regret it. You never say, oh, gee, I should have stayed married to that guy or to that girl. You say, wow, my life has really improved now that I'm out of that very, very stressful and unworkable situation.
So it's about getting to that point.
Exactly.
And working that way. On the flip side, what's been your most fulfilling or rewarding experience being a matrimonial attorney?
You know, the repairing families with, you know, really, really difficult conflict. And, you know, I think from my perspective, I think if you handle things as an attorney with a real view towards making sure that the damage is controlled, I think in the long run, you have happier, healthier people, and people who can survive the stress of the divorce process to go on to having good relationships with each other. You know, you want to have, you know, children who are happy to have two parents that divorced years before, you know, attend their wedding in a nice and respectful and happy way. And that's what you want to foster.
And you definitely hear of cases of, like they come together and walk their bride down the aisle together, and then I've heard of cases where they don't show up to the wedding, or you sit there across the room, or I sit there, you have to pay for this, like years down the line.
Yeah, and if there isn't, absent, there are people, a lot of people get divorced because there's somebody in the couple who is not functioning at the highest level and is violent, or has like a really discernible personality disorder. That's, I'm not saying that those people you should be happy with those people down the line. I'm saying, people who are relatively normal should try their best to wrap up their divorce in a way that shows them that results in their being happy years later, happy enough with each other.
Absolutely. So that certainly leads to the question, COVID-19 pandemic, we're all home with our wives and husbands and kids or significant others, partners. You have people who are violent on a normal day, and tough. Like, what have you been seeing from your clients and pending situations? Does this increase and turn up the volume on the violence, on the stupidity, on the fighting, or have people become more reasonable in some cases?
It's interesting. I mean, I think it is also a case by case kind of basis. This is something that really keeps me up at night, worrying about the people who are trapped at home with abusers. That's really scary, because there's nowhere to go, and it's not the safest place. Thankfully, our city and in New York City, at least, there are a lot of resources, some of them better than others, for people who are in domestic violence situations. But to answer your specific question, what have I seen? I've seen, running the gamut. By and large, I think this staying at home exacerbates problems in a relationship. That's kind of what I've seen. And I kind of was hopeful at the beginning that, having this larger problem that we're all facing, globally, would kind of encourage people to behave a little better than they would have normally. I don't necessarily think that that's happening. I think that stress exacerbates people's bad behavior. And so when you're locked in together and you have nowhere else to go, it's a recipe for broken relationships, certainly. I think also a huge factor in people getting divorced is drug and alcohol abuse. And I think that people are at home drinking a lot. And I think people get into big fights, and it's dangerous for people. But I've also seen places where people have really come together. I think one of the most important things is that, you have often co-parenting situations where the parents wouldn't necessarily kind of share the information that they need to share in a typical situation without this global pandemic. I have seen parents come together and make good decisions with respect to the safety of their kids, making sure that the kids are as protected from COVID-19 as possible, including, ensuring protocols with respect to transferring the children back and forth for parenting time.
Yeah, I discussed this with Alec Kirshner last week, who's a commercial real estate broker. And I know that it doesn't compare because you're dealing with family, nuclear family, people being together. But I was saying that I felt that in dealing with landlords as a small business owner, things seem to have calmed down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And people were, where it might not have been so pleasant to deal with each other in the past, it definitely became a little bit easier because you have this global situation that we're all facing. So, I mean, that makes sense to me on that end, but it also makes sense to me when everyone's home and, even in a perfect marriage, when you're home, you have two kids on Zoom and, school classes, and you have to get your work done and you have to juggle balancing, or even having me time, alone time to unwind, that's gone. So I could see how that can also be, a huge issue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's true.
Yeah. So tell us about like what was your daily routine like with balancing your family and being a powerful partner at a law firm prior to Corona, and what's it like now, and like how are you getting your work done with juggling all of that?
Well, prior to this, I had it all set up. It was really, I knew what I was doing. I was able to get my children back and forth to their school and walk to work, luckily, and walk home from work. And what I miss, I'm sure everybody else does, is stopping by the Gap on my way home or by the supermarket or Dwayne Reed and picking up my stuff and having, was my little bit of me time, obviously. So now it's very different. I very, very grateful to be working, very, very grateful that my spouse is working, but juggling, giving each other time to do our work is definitely challenging. And being, what, for me, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but the constant meal preparation and cleaning up is very different than my regular life. And that there's being a lot of frozen pizza being eaten at the moment.
There's nothing wrong with frozen pizza.
So yummy. I really,
even if you don't have an oven, I just chew on it sometimes,
It's good for those who are teething.
Absolutely, exactly. Without getting too personal, do you have advice for, I mean, again, from your own marriage, or what tools do you apply to yourself that you've learned from dealing with so many contentious divorces or situations that you would give to people to get through this next, couple of weeks until we get through the phases and things open up? Or, if God forbid we have a second wave, like how do we go back into this? Like how to best approach being kind and getting to the point of coming back together, even if there is tension?
So, I guess my advice would be twofold, because I have my pop psychology advice that, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know, but I have been in therapy in my life, not recently, but, and I learned a lot from that. And, I think one of the important things for you to think about is that your spouse may not have, there might be information that's missing from whatever dialogue you have with that person, and that you kind of have to anticipate or at least kind of analyze what information your spouse doesn't have and try to kind of provide that. I think that, expectation management is a huge thing professionally, and you should try to kind of do that with your spouse to adjust your expectations for global pandemic circumstances. Like, you're not going to get everything that you want right now. It's not going to be normal times. Let's try to figure out a way that is palatable for everybody to be happy in the end. I think from like a divorce lawyer perspective, how do you navigate your relationship with your spouse?
Well, from a divorce lawyer perspective, do you want them to avoid problem? No, I'm joking.
Right. I don't start fights, but I'll finish. Yeah. Another good cliche. But I find, one of the things is that, people write emails or people post on social media without thinking very much about it. So I think a big piece of advice is write your email, write your post, draft it, and then walk away from your computer for a little bit and come back to it an hour later or even the next day and reread it and find out, is there a way I could kind of communicate this in a way that makes me look less hysterical or crazy or angry or whatever. Try to keep it above board, take the high road where you can. And when we're back to normal, you can go, you can kind of exacerbate the situation as much as you want. But I think that's a really good piece of advice. Or write your scathing email and send it to a friend or to your lawyer and let somebody else kind of look at it and think about it for a second before you pull the trigger on that. And definitely, take a walk outside to the extent that you're able to. Wear your mask, but definitely carve out some time for yourself.
That's fantastic advice. I'm going to take that advice when I write my collections emails.
Exactly.
I'll send it.
A different thing, right?
Yeah, I'll send it to someone else first, because sometimes they start off a little bit, little angry and emotional.
Good fellas, but I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. The day-to-day practice of the firm, like both as I'll separate the questions. What's it like to practice from home and to, again, you're in social work and law, you want to be there at a conference table, the client's crying, and hand them a tissue and be with them. Like, you're talking to them like we're talking right now. How has, that physical touch or that, in-person hands-on experience changed due to the virus?
I think that's such a good question. So a day-to-day practice is, living in a technologically advanced era. It's very, very easy to be in contact with the clients, whether it's by Zoom or, email and stuff like that, or FaceTime. There's lots of ways to be in touch. Also, our office, Stutman and Lichtenstein, is 100% up and running. We are able to put together motions, and we are able to contact other attorneys. We're able to do legal research. Anything that we need to do, we can do virtually from our very disparate places where we are right now. The big thing in practice right now is, the courts in New York are, as we sit here today, mostly closed to non-essential businesses. I have to say, I think the state of New York has done an extraordinary job in scrambling to get things online as much as they can, as quickly as they can. I have found the judges to be extremely receptive and available for the most part. But as of today, there's no new cases being filed, at least in New York City and surrounding areas. I think there's some movement now with the upstate regions, but it's not 100% clear how things are going to get filed. Existing cases, judges are considering those things, and super emergencies. I'm talking just about the matrimonial and divorce world right now. Existing cases you can file stuff on, and new cases, certainly order of protection you can get with a judge, a habeas corpus writ, that kind of stuff is available. It's just a little tough navigating, because all the courts are different and they have different protocols. We have been debating in my practice area, though, what is this going to mean for the future? Obviously, everybody is thinking about their own individual practice areas and their industries. What is this going to mean for the future? I think that, in our practice area, there is a tremendous amount of value to being able to sit in the same room with a judge and have the judge tell you, or a mediator, or a binding arbitrator, here's what you guys should expect, and this is how you're going to resolve this case. This is how I see it happening. Or here's how the process of a trial is going to happen. And also, it's really important sometimes to just be in the courthouse with another lawyer to try to come to a resolution. I think as we get more comfortable with this technology, that value might lessen. But for right now, I think we kind of really do need, until we've really gotten good and practiced at this virtual world, it's going to be hard to operate without the in-person personal touch.
That's a great answer and really interesting. I mean, aside from the emergency orders, or from the court, the court's opening up for emergencies, have any of your clients that are more amicable and kinder with each other moved to get things done faster through mediation and arbitration, or is that not flowing either?
It's a tough question to answer. My personal practice, my personal cases, I certainly have heard whisperings of clients that some of them want to move forward faster, but I think it's just part of like the idea of the squeaky wheel. The cases that I have that are most contentious are the ones that I'm hearing from most, and this hasn't really kind of lowered the temperature, unfortunately, on those contentious cases. However, as things kind of as we go forward in this, I would anticipate that at least some people are going to, tire of this and kind of get some perspective and try to, and certainly as financial difficulties become more and more present, people aren't going to really have a choice but to try to resolve stuff.
I have heard that some people stay together when the market's down and when money's down because they want to wait till it pops back. Is that something that you're seeing or that you've heard of as well?
I've certainly heard of that. I think that, I started being a matrimonial lawyer right after the global economic downturn of 2008. And what I saw then was a huge uptick. There was just lots and lots of cases. There were a lot of people getting divorced at that time. And I think that the buzz is that there is an expectation that as things actually devolve, as they get worse, that I think people will be moved to actually separate as opposed to sticking through it.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's move to an even more contentious topic of custody. It's a tough time, right? We're required to be quarantined if someone has the virus or they're a frontline worker. Let's start with that. I mean, do you have any clients or heard of cases with frontline workers or EMTs where they have joint custody, but the other spouse who has the child is not allowing the frontline worker or EMT to see their children because of exposure?
Yes. So it's gotten a lot of attention in the press, as you know, that there have been a lot of back and forth between parents about how children can safely visit with a non-custodial parent during the COVID-19 crisis. And I think it has changed a lot from the first couple of weeks of this, where people were really frightened and justifiably so, to let their child, go back and forth between two different homes. And in the beginning of this, I really saw that judges also were very, very cautious. They were operating in abundance of caution and not so excited about, letting a child go back and forth between houses. I think over time that has changed, where parents can show that they have taken all reasonable precautions, that they, are using a mask, that they're disinfecting, that the car is disinfected, that there's a recent negative antibody test or whatever. Once all that information is provided, judges are certainly erring on the side of allowing parenting time to go forward. There's a judge in New York State, Judge Sunshine, who wrote an editorial in the first couple of days of this, and he said very, very smartly, I thought, it's time for parents to really talk about these issues and to support each other and make sure that the kids have time with each parent to the extent that they're able to. But essentially what he was saying was like, behave nicely, because if you're not working together during this time and you come back before me after this pandemic is closed, and I know that you're not acting in the joint best interest of the children, I'm going to remember that, and it's going to affect my decision in the long run. And he even encouraged, and he said to lawyers, if you're having a problem communicating this to your clients, you should send this along. But I think the current climate now is that people should be doing their best, if it's safe, to allow both parents to have the time that they're supposed to have with the kids.
I think that's fascinating that the judge said that, because we have all these excuses, and we should take these. We have this enormous global pressure on us, but it's not a vacuum, and life will go on after this. And like those who are jerks or kind during this period, I think they will be remembered for that. And I'm happy to see that the judge will remember too, because people get nasty. That on the flip side, I saw one of the partners at your firm, was quoted in an article recently about a couple that had gotten divorced a significant amount of years ago, and they decided to move back in together so that they could have joint custody and be with the kid. Like, what could that be like? What kind of discussion do you have to have, and what kind of people do you have to be to do that? And especially because in the article they said there's a reason we got divorced, but we're doing it for the kid. So what kind of people are able to do that, in your opinion?
I think people maybe who are have had a lot of time to reflect on their choices, or people who maybe have had a lot of therapy. I don't know. Brave people, certainly. I think it's. I don't know that I would necessarily counsel people to do that. But by the same token, if it's something that works for you, then, and you really do believe it's the best thing for your children health wise, then, if it works for your family, that's what you should do.
So does that, at the end of the quarantine, does that become an eviction matter, or is that another matrimonial matter?
I'm not qualified to talk to you about eviction matters, but I would, if they need help, you can come talk to me. I'll look into. We'll write a letter.
Can we get divorced again? We're not even married. We're not. Yeah. Where can everyone find you guys? If someone is dealing with tough times right now, wants to talk to someone. I know you're always kind to give advice and talk to people prior to engaging. But where can you guys be found?
On the internet, I guess, and then I have an email address at valerie.tocci@sslllp.com. You can certainly email me. I'm checking my email. And constantly between episodes of Sesame Street and stuff. So please reach out to us. Anybody, we're all available. There's we have 6 lawyers in our firm, 7 lawyers in our firm, and we have staff. So we have a telephone number you can call and stuff, and we're available and very, very happy to talk, just talk and get some perspective.
And I think it's also, it's important to note about your firm that, that you have real firepower, hardworking, intelligent, amazing attorneys, but you also have, such as yourself, it's a firm that are mostly women. So you have experience with domestic, with working with domestic violence victims. And I feel like, it must feel amazing, to be able to help fellow women in need when they're dealing with, not just a regular divorce or an amicable divorce, but, a real tough situation.
Yeah, I think that's a gratifying part of any matrimonial practice, to help people who are in danger. Our firm is, you're right, it is mostly women. We're kind of, we have also one man, Michael Stutman. Our firm, I think the feature of the firm is that we're a really well-known matrimonial boutique in Manhattan, in New York City. We're known in Nassau and in Suffolk and in Brooklyn and Westchester. And, many years of experience, certainly among our most senior lawyers. We have practiced in the courts for a long time, and I think we have a very, very good reputation among our colleagues, as well as judges and other kinds of, professionals, whether they're evaluators, forensic evaluators, accountants, those kinds of things. We have this very good reputation of being, aggressive advocates, but by the same token, sensible. And I think we have a good reputation as taking positions that make sense. And I think that's a real virtue when you're looking for a divorce lawyer.
My last question, because it was in the news this morning, Mary-Kate Olsen, they just announced that they're getting divorced. He's got a lot of money. She's got a lot of money. How do you approach a situation like that, where with celebrity, you have media involved, lots of outside pressures? How would you approach something like that, a high-profile divorce?
It's really interesting. I think that, there are obviously big issues. There's a prenuptial agreement, I'm sure, which lays out a lot of their obligations to each other. And, obviously the press can be used in kind of as a sword rather than as a shield. And I think that their lawyers are probably doing that right now. I don't know. I mean, I think at the moment, during our global pandemic situation, I think people are a little bit more focused on the front page of the post as opposed to page 6. But that's always a nice respite. So, I obviously wish them both well. And I think you're right. Probably some of their issues have been exacerbated by, oh my God, sharing, an apartment together. That's really tough, but wish them the best, certainly. I always think, though, if I were in a similar situation, I probably would have gotten on a plane to Los Angeles and, ridden out the quarantine there. But hopefully they'll be able to come again to a solution, because I don't think they have children. There is enough resources that I think it might be better for them to read the prenuptial agreement and define their obligations to each other and move forward that way.
Do you think it's hurtful, just as a follow-up to that, do you think it's hurtful or helpful when media gets involved in these cases?
I think it depends on the matter. I think sometimes the media can really be helpful. And I think also it depends sort of on if you're going into a litigation situation, who the judge is and how the judge feels about the media, and whether the judge can see through who's planting what. And by the same token, I think that sometimes the litigants don't really have a choice. I mean, I think that the press often comes after people in this situation because it is an interesting topic. I mean, it's interesting to people. And sometimes that kind of media focus gets a little bit out of control of the people.
They love just taking those pictures together and putting the cut line down the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the media didn't do so well, or the paparazzi didn't do so well for Carmelo and Lala when he was caught on the front of that yacht with someone who wasn't Lala. So
before paparazzi, I heard Amy Schumer saying when she left her apartment in New York City that the paparazzi were like, "Amy, where are you going? So you're going upstate? Wait, we need you. You don't have anyone to take pictures of."
Exactly. They have to wear masks too. Valerie, it's been exceptionally informative, and I encourage anyone who who's thinking about or dealing with any bad situation right now to reach out to you, especially those who might be dealing with violence issues, because that's unacceptable, and that never should there be a time that anyone stands for that. So you got fighter, protector, and someone who tries to get everyone to the end result that they all want and don't regret. So thank you so much for joining today. And
thank you for having me. It's really cool.
I appreciate it. We look forward to sharing it everywhere. Have a good rest of the day.
Mwah, big kiss.
Bye. Bye.